Story 5. They're not here. It had been 2 weeks since the last visit. He didn't know why they chose him. What he did know was that nobody believed him. It usually arrived around midnight, waking him from sleep. It was the bright lights that illuminated the room. These were what woke him, and that's all that he remembered. It was the same each time. 2 strange marks on his neck and 2 small holes on his temporal lobes. He always felt violated, but he was used to it now. The marks and the small holes vanished after around 15 minutes from waking, and for some reason never showed up on photos. Even the DVR never recorded a single incident. He was frustrated, scared, and alone dealing with his nightmare. He was already awake as his alarm sounded, 6 a.m. Feeding the animals was his daily routine. The farm was left to him by his grandfather. Only 5 of his cattle remained from 10. They had took them, mutilated them, and then dumped them back. He was sure of that. There was no other explanation. 13 acres of land, and not a person for miles. He filled up the pig trough and topped up the chicken coop before tending to the horses. He heard the sound of Jed's horn as he arrived in his pickup. Jed, the general store assistant from town, delivered Carl's animal feed weekly. "Hello? Carl?" shouted Jed as he banged on the front door of the house. "Just a minute," shouted Carl from the stable. Jed began to unload the feed. Carl made his way over. "Hey, Jed," said Carl in a friendly manner, walking towards him. "Hey, Carl. How's things?" "Oh, the usual, Jed," replied Carl nonchalantly. "Okay, you got your horse and chicken feed. Should be enough for the week," said Jed as he pulled out his invoice book. "Thanks," replied Carl. Jed passed a pen and the invoice sheet over to Carl. "Say, you sure you're okay, Carl?" Jed had noticed the bags under Carl's eyes, encased in dark circles. He had told Jed when the visits began. The rest of Gruswick Town thought he was a lunatic. Jed was more understanding. "Not sleeping too well, Jed," said Carl. "The visits?" questioned Jed. "It's been a couple of weeks since the last one," replied Carl sheepishly. "Maybe it stopped," said Jed enthusiastically. "Maybe, but I'm more concerned about the cattle. I've only 5 now. I'm sure it's them, Jed." "I'm sure there's a logical explanation to it all, Carl. I'll take a look down near the creek. I've known folks' livestock to take a trip down to the lake," said Jed. "Thanks, Jed. I appreciate that." Jed made his way back to the pickup. Carl waved him off as he headed back up the dirt track. It was around 1:30 p.m. when Carl finished up with the livestock. A pot of stew bubbled on the hob as Carl made his way inside the farmhouse. He took off his boots and added another log to the burner before sitting down. He poured himself a whiskey and kicked up his feet, taking a sip of his drink. He then placed it on the wooden handmade table in front of him. It was around 3:30 p.m. when Carl was awoken by a knock at the door. It was Jed. Carl got up and greeted Jed at the door. "Hi, Carl. I took a trip down to the lake." "Any luck?" replied Carl. Jed took a deep breath before telling Carl the bad news. "I found 2 of them, Carl." Carl invited Jed inside. "They're dead," sighed Jed. Carl ran his hand over his head in despair. "They were in a bad way, Carl." Carl sat down and finished the remainder of the whiskey. "Their eyes were gone, removed by the look of it." "Jesus," said Carl in shock. "I'm going to get to the bottom of this, Carl. Don't worry," said Jed sympathetically. "Thanks for all your help, Jed." Carl showed Jed to the door. Jed waved his arm out of the pickup's window as he exited the farm. Back in the farmhouse, Carl scooped himself a bowl of the stew from the hob. Its meaty aroma filled the house. Taking a hunk of bread from the larder, he sat at the dining table. 6 seats. Only 1 now occupied. Only memories were left of when the table was filled with family members. He sat and ate, contemplating whether they would visit tonight. Every time he lost cattle, there was a visit. Carl's nervousness and anxiety caused him to knock the spoon from his bowl. He quickly placed it back in. 9:30 p.m., and he switched off his TV, made his way to the bedroom, and lay awake for a while before drifting off to sleep. 15 miles up the road at Kathy's bar, Jed and his brother Eli drank beers as they contemplated their next move. "So there's no way he will sell?" said Eli. "He's not going to budge. I've been mentioning it for a month now, telling him it might be easier to move, but he's holding strong," replied a frustrated Jed. "God damn it. Then we do it tonight. I've got 2 more doses of propofol. That should do it," seethed Eli, as he signaled over the waitress for 2 more beers. Jed and Eli's father had told them about the land before his death. Their father worked at Gruswick Construction as a surveyor. He had told them that Carl's land sat on a wildcat well. He told them that there must be one hell of a reservoir below that property. Their father had left them with a health insurance check of £250,000. Carl's land was worth 3 times that amount, and an untold fortune lay beneath. Jed and Eli thought with a little persuasion they could force Carl to sell. Their plan was simple. Eli worked at the general hospital as an orderly. He had access to the medical supply room. That's where he took the propofol and the epinephrine from. For the past 2 months, Jed and Eli visited Carl's house randomly, always around midnight. Both of them dressed in the alien costumes that Jed had bought online. Whilst Carl was asleep, Eli administered the propofol injection. The drug coursed through his veins, rendering Carl's central nervous system. Eli then injected a tiny dose of epinephrine into Carl's neck, just enough to bring him round, but not enough to take away the effect of the propofol. He then positioned electroshock pads to Carl's temporal lobes. A light shock from the remote device was used to blur Carl's vision, also using a pulsating flashlight to further confuse, whilst they both stood at the foot of the bed menacingly. The procedure lasted around 30 minutes. Jed always made sure to erase the camera footage that Carl had set up in the room before they left. Their antics caused mass confusion for Carl, filling his mind with the concept of a mock alien visit. Jed turned off the lights to the pickup as they approached the dirt track leading to Carl's. They parked way before the farm so as not to spook the animals. "Grab the bag," Eli gestured to Jed. The leather holdall lay in the back of the truck. Alighting from the vehicle, Eli slowly made his way to the front door of Carl's. Jed followed close behind. He used the spare key that lay on top of the door frame. Both Eli and Jed stopped in the hallway as they put on the tight-fitting suits. Moving to the bedroom, Eli quickly administered the propofol into Carl's neck. "Get the flashlight ready," whispered Eli to Jed. It was then that they heard distress. Carl's livestock outside. Jed moved open the curtains to see a bright beam of light. He stood in shock as he watched a cow levitating downwards towards the ground. He looked up towards where the light shone from and noticed a circular object hovering motionless and silent in the night sky. There was a brief flash of a second beam of light. Beside the first beam, 2 figures appeared. Jed leaned closer to the window and squinted, trying to focus on the 2 elongated silhouettes. "What the hell are you doing?" said Eli, angrily whispering as he placed the medical items on the bedside table. Jed didn't reply, as he watched another cow traveling down the beam of light, then another, totaling 5. 5 replaced the 5 that were previously abducted. The Greys ushered the genetically modified cattle into the fields to join the rest. "There's something out here," said Jed, now trembling. "What are you talking about?" replied Eli, making his way to join Jed. Eli moved the curtain wider. 2 sets of green eyes looked towards them. As they noticed the movement, Eli quickly drew the curtains shut. Shit! What the fuck is that?" said Eli as he backed away from the window erratically. "I've no idea," replied Jed nervously. "Let's get out of here," said Eli, quickly packing up the leather holdall. Carl lay comatose and completely oblivious to what was unfolding. There was no time to erase the camera footage as they made their way to the back door of the property. Making haste, they exited the rear of the property. Eli dropped the leather holdall as he noticed the 2 Greys 6 feet in front of him. Jed made a run for it, quite comically dressed head to toe in an alien outfit, but it was no use. One of the Greys deployed some sort of pulse weapon, completely evaporating him. "Wait, please!" yelled Eli, fumbling, trying to remove his alien mask. The other Grey trained his weapon towards him. "I'm human! See?" said Eli, manically thinking that because of his outfit, he was a threat of the alien kind. The Grey lowered his weapon and signaled to the ship. The same beam of light that delivered the cattle now pulled Eli screaming skyward. A second light transporter now collected the Greys, pulling them too back to the ship. There was a blinding flash as the ship departed, leaving Carl's farm back in darkness. It was 6:30 a.m. when Carl woke. It was the sound of his cattle that woke him, 5 more than the day before. He stood, baffled at the front of his property, as he stared at his full herd. The only difference now was that 3 of his pigs had gone. He usually remembered the visits, but for some reason this time was different. Carl made his way back to the bedroom and checked his camera footage. He finally knew what had been going on all along. He would call Sergeant North, embarrassed, and tell him of his findings, only this time, from the many times he had called the sergeant out, who often told him that aliens don't exist. Carl would have to agree that these events were earthbound, and that they're not here, and have never been here.